Greetings to you and welcome to this episode of Grace Podcast. I'm Timothy Muse. I'll be your host as we spend this time together today. It's a joy to be with you. I want to thank you for tuning in. I want to thank you for making this podcast a part of your journey. And I want to thank you for being on this journey, for carrying forward, for asking the deep questions, for looking into aspects of your life that need some attention. You know, when we talk about this, it doesn't mean that you're living a bad life. Please don't hear a criticism or a judgment. That is not the case. The fact that you're here is an act of courage. It's an act of courage to say that there are places in my life that I need a little extra attention, that I need to give a little time to. And that's an awesome and incredible thing. Good for you for being here. If this podcast is helpful, as always, share it out there. Put it out there on your social media feeds. I post on LinkedIn, X, Instagram, and Facebook. If you follow me or the life coaching on any one of those feeds, you're going to see these episodes. If you're on one of the listening platforms, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or Amazon Music, follow us, give us a rating and review. Every positive rating and review tells the platform people are listening, and you'll get notification when a new episode comes out. And if you want to reach out to me directly, GraceLifeCoaching.com is the website. I truly would love to hear from you. GraceLifeCoaching.com if you want to do some coaching, some Reiki, some meditation, whatever I can do. However I can come alongside you, I would love to do that. GraceLifeCoaching.com. So we continue on in our series of what the end of summer can teach us as we grow. And our first episode, we looked at, being reminded that the season isn't over yet. There's still time to show up. There's still a lot of decision, a lot of choices, a lot of steps. We can finish well because summer isn't over yet. Last episode, we talked about noticing what grew while we weren't looking. And that happens. Growth happens when we're not looking. So we need to stop and turn around and see what is growing as we continue to push forward. Today, we're going to take another step because eventually growth produces something. Eventually, what has been planted begins to mature. Eventually, we reach a point where we need to stop simply looking at what is grown and ask, what can I harvest from this season? Late summer has always been connected to harvest. Gardens are producing. Farm stands are so full. Tomatoes are ripening faster than most people know what to do with them. Cornfields have changed dramatically from the small green shoots that appeared earlier this year. Things that were planted months ago have become something we can finally gather in. And I think there's a wonderful lesson in that because every season of your life produces something. Sometimes it produces success. Sometimes it produces memories. Sometimes it produces relationships. Sometimes it produces opportunities. And sometimes it produces wisdom. Even difficult seasons can give us something worthy of carrying forward. So today I want to encourage you. Don't leave the season empty-handed. Don't leave the season empty-handed. Harvest what it gave you. You know, one of the problems of modern life is that we move too quickly from one thing to another. We finish one project, we start another. We finish a vacation, we go back to work. We complete one goal, we set another. We solve one problem, immediately we start worrying about the next one. We don't leave much room for reflection. And when we don't reflect on our experiences, we often lose some of the wisdom those experiences could give us. We say things like, well, that's over. Glad that's done. What's next? But maybe before asking what's next, we should ask, what did that teach me? That's a very different question. Because experiences don't automatically make us wiser. You can experience something without learning from it. You can make the same mistake repeatedly. You can enter the same unhealthy relationship pattern. You can repeatedly overcommit yourself. You can keep creating the same financial problems. You can continue reacting to stress in the same unhealthy way. You can go through experience after experience without stopping long enough to ask what those experiences are trying to teach you. Experience alone isn't always the teacher. Reflection is what turns experience into wisdom. And that's important because the harvest isn't always what we expect. I mean, imagine planting a garden. You have expectations. You expect certain plants to thrive. You expect a certain amount of produce. But anyone who's ever grown anything knows it doesn't always work according to plans. Sometimes the tomatoes did wonderfully and the peppers didn't. Maybe the zucchini took over everything. Maybe insects got something before you did. Maybe there wasn't enough rain like we had last year or too much rain like we're getting this year. Maybe something grew that you didn't expect. Life is like that. We can begin seasons with expectations. We think this is how this year is going to go. This is how this relationship's going to go. This job is going to be perfect. This opportunity is going to change everything. I'm going to accomplish this goal by this date. And then life happens. Sometimes the harvest looks exactly like what we had hoped. Sometimes it looks completely different. But here's the important question. Can you recognize value even when the season didn't produce what you expected? That's maturity. Because sometimes the greatest thing you harvest isn't what you originally planned for. Sometimes what you harvest is wisdom. Maybe something didn't work out. You tried, you invested time, you gave energy, you hoped, and it failed. And your first reaction may be, well, that was a waste of time. But was it? Maybe the result wasn't what you wanted. But what did you learn? Maybe you learned that you were stronger than you thought. Maybe you learned that you didn't want to do that kind of work anymore. Maybe you learned what kind of relationship you need. Maybe you discovered a boundary you should have established sooner. Maybe you learned that your priorities were wrong. Maybe you discovered that something you thought was desperately wanted wasn't actually right for you. Maybe you learned how to recover from disappointment. That matters. That matters. Sometimes wisdom is the harvest. And wisdom is valuable because of how it changes you entering into the next season. Okay? Wisdom changes how you enter into the next season. Wisdom gives us a lesson we don't want to waste. We've probably all had experiences looking back at something and thinking, I should have known better. Maybe you ignored warning signs. Maybe someone gave you good advice and you didn't listen. Maybe you repeated a familiar pattern. There's no value in beating yourself up about it forever, but there is value in learning. The goal isn't, I will never make another mistake. That's impossible. Trust me, it is. The better goal is, I don't want to keep paying tuition for the same lesson. Life teaches us things. Sometimes the tuition is expensive. Time, money, heartache, stress, embarrassment, disappointment, lost opportunity. If you've already paid for the lesson, take the education. Learn from it. Learn from the wisdom of those moments. Otherwise, you may find yourself paying for the same lesson again and again. So when we reflect on these seasons and we come out, sometimes what we gather is wisdom. We gather the wisdom of learning about ourselves so that we don't keep repeating the same patterns over and over again. And one of the ways we do that is ask better questions. We ask better questions about our past. You know, when we look backwards, we often ask unhelpful questions. Why did I do that? What was I thinking? Why didn't I know better? Why did I waste so much time? Those questions usually lead to shame rather than wisdom. Shame doesn't change us. Shame keeps us trapped. Wisdom helps us to grow. Try changing the questions. You know, instead of saying, why was I so stupid? Ask, what did I understand now that I didn't understand then? What's different about me now that wasn't the same then? Instead of saying, you know, why did I stay so long? Which is a very, very powerful question. What will I recognize sooner next time? Because we repeat these patterns over and over again. That's how we function. Wisdom helps us recognize them and not enter into them to the same caliber. It doesn't mean we're not going to do them, but it gives us a little bit more of a capability of seeing them sooner. You know, instead of saying, why did I fail? Ask, what contributed to the outcome? Because maybe it just wasn't you. Maybe there were other factors involved. You know, if you plant a garden and you say, why did I fail? And it rained every day and the sun never came out. You didn't fail. The weather didn't cooperate. What other factors are involved? Or instead of saying, you know, what's wrong with me, which is, you know, a very powerful thing that people say too. You can ask, what needs to change? What needs to change? What's wrong with me when I look back and I see that I did this and I keep doing it? What needs to change? What's different? Better questions produce better reflection. And better reflection produces better choices because those choices are made in wisdom and not reaction. Again, and maybe that's what you need to harvest coming out of this. Maybe that's what you need to harvest. But the other thing we want to make sure we harvest is the good too. Now, don't make the mistake of thinking reflection is only about problems. Sometimes we're really excellent at analyzing failure and terrible at studying success. Something goes wrong and we spend hours asking why. Something goes right and we simply say, great, then move on. But success contains lessons too. If something went well this summer, ask why. Maybe you felt more peaceful. Why? Maybe because you spent more time outside. Maybe you took some vacation days. Maybe you weren't overscheduled. Maybe you spent time with friends. Maybe you exercised more. Maybe you disconnected from your phone. All that's information. Your life is telling you something. If you feel better when you lived a certain way, don't ignore that. Ask the right question. What conditions helped me to thrive? That's an incredibly important question, because many of us know exactly what makes us miserable, but haven't taken time to identify what helps us to flourish. And we want to know that too. We don't want to just harvest the bad. We want to harvest the good too. We want to harvest the successes, because that's what we're gaining for. That's what we're leaning for, right? The successes. So we want to harvest the successes just as much as we harvest the failures, and spend just as much time thinking about and dwelling on the successes. Asking that question, what brought you alive? What made life worth living? Look, we're all living. We have a heartbeat and a pulse and all of these, things that show that we have life inside of us. But that doesn't mean we're always alive. What helps you to be alive? Think back over the past few months. When did you feel the most alive? When did life seem to be the greatest? Was it sitting down around a table with people you love? Was it walking outside or traveling or creating something? Was it working with your hands or helping someone or learning something? Was it sitting quietly, listening to music, being near water, playing with your children or grandchildren, working towards a goal, laughing with friends? Pay attention to those moments. Pay attention to the moments that make you feel alive. They aren't necessarily instructions to completely change your life. You may not be able to spend every day sitting by a lake, but they are clues. They're clues that we want to harvest from. They're telling you about something that restores you, what energizes you, what matters, what makes life feel meaningful. Harvest that knowledge, because that knowledge turns to wisdom. It turns to wisdom because it's important and it shows you a path. But in the same breath, when we ask the question, what brought you to, what brought you alive? What made you feel alive? You also want to ask the question, what drained you? You want to go to the opposite question as well. What drained you? Not simply what made you tired. Good things can make us tired. A long hike can make us tired. Playing with children can make us tired. Working hard on something meaningful can make us tired. I'm talking about the things that left you depleted. Maybe it was constantly checking your social media. Maybe it was saying yes when you wanted to say no. Maybe it was spending time around constant negativity. Maybe it was trying to keep everyone happy. Maybe it was overcommitting yourself. Maybe it was worrying about things you can't control. Maybe it was comparing your life to other people's lives. Maybe it was a schedule with absolutely no margin. Notice it. Notice what drained you, because that's part of the harvest too. That's part of the harvest we draw in. Knowing what drains you helps you make decisions about what you will allow into your next season. Because that's the thing. We're moving into the next season. The harvest we have in this season is going to move into the next season. So when we learn what drains us, it helps us make better decisions about what we will allow into the next season of our life, whatever that season is, whether it is a job or a relationship or exercise routines or whatever. And one of the things to keep in mind is that not every lesson needs to become a life rule. We are pretty good at that. Sometimes we overreact to one experience. One person betrays us and we decide you can't trust anybody. One opportunity fails and we decide I'll never take another risk again. One relationship ends and we decide love isn't worth it. One mistake happens and we decide I'm terrible at this. That's not wisdom. That's pain trying to become philosophy, really, quite frankly. Be careful. The lesson from one difficult person isn't necessarily people are terrible. Maybe the lesson is I need healthier boundaries. The lesson from failure isn't never try again. Maybe it's next time prepare differently. The lesson from disappointment isn't never hope. Maybe it's hold expectations more loosely. Harvest wisdom. Don't harvest bitterness. There's a difference. And when we take a singular event and turn it into a life lesson, it becomes bitter. I had this failed relationship, and so because I had this failed relationship, I'm never going to love again. Love isn't worth it. And then 6 months later, I meet this person who is incredible. But remember, I'm never going to love again. And that bitterness is going to hold on inside of me. Or I want to try something new, but last time I failed, risk isn't worth it. But then I'm not going to be able to do that new thing. I'm going to hold on to that life lesson. Not all lessons are life lessons. Some lessons are just experiential lessons that we draw into ourselves and we learn from, but we don't set life lessons on. We don't. We can't do that, because then we won't be alive. Then we'll just be constantly depleted. Another thing we want to make sure that we keep as part of our harvest is gratitude. It's an important part of gathering what the season has to give us, and that's gratitude. Gratitude doesn't mean pretending everything is wonderful. It means recognizing what was good even when everything wasn't good. Maybe this summer wasn't easy, but perhaps there were still moments, a conversation, a meal, a sunset, a quiet morning, a friend who checked in, someone who made you laugh, a day when you felt like yourself again. We sometimes overlook these moments because they weren't dramatic. They weren't over the top. But life is mostly made of ordinary moments. If we're waiting for extraordinary events before we're grateful, we'll miss most of our lives. Gratitude teaches us to notice. And noticing changes the way we experience life. Gratitude teaches us to notice the joy in the ordinary moments. And we want to harvest that. Maybe there wasn't one big, massive thing that happened this summer, this last season. But maybe there were a string of little things all balled together that were just as big as one big thing. You know, maybe you didn't get to go away on a vacation for a week, but maybe you took a couple of day trips here or there. Maybe you didn't get the job that you wanted to get, but you had time to work in your garden for the first time in a long time. Gratitude, being grateful for the little joys of ordinary life and holding on to them. We want to harvest that. We want to make sure that we harvest our gratitude as well as we move forward. You know, and sometimes even in the midst of gratitude, harvest takes time to understand. There are also experiences you won't understand immediately. You may not know what something taught you yet, and that's okay. You know, some lessons need time. You know, as we harvest lessons, some lessons need time. You may look back 5 years from now and realize, now I understand why that changed me. Sometimes we want immediate meaning. Something happens and we ask why. But life doesn't always give us immediate answers. Sometimes all we can say is, I don't understand this yet. Notice the word yet. That's different from saying there's nothing to learn. Give yourself time. Give yourself time to learn the wisdom in the harvest, because some things don't make sense right now. Don't try to force them, but don't throw them away either. Let them reside. Let them grow. Let them take time to mature. You know, for anybody who, enjoys a fine wine or a fine bourbon or a fine scotch or good chocolate, those things take time to age. You can't just make wine and then drink it right out of the vat. It needs time to age and breathe and grow. It needs time to expand and contract. It takes maturity. Some lessons in life, some wisdom takes maturity and time to learn. Here's something I would encourage you to do, and that's not to carry the whole season with you. Harvesting doesn't mean carrying everything. I mean, imagine a farmer taking the entire field into the barn, the plants, the roots, the soil, the weeds, everything. That wouldn't make any sense. You gather what is useful. You leave what isn't. Very important. You gather what is useful. You leave what isn't. That's what reflection helps you to do emotionally. Take the wisdom, leave the shame. Take the memories, leave the need to create them, to recreate them. Take the lesson, leave the bitterness. Take the strength you discovered, leave the fear that produced it. Take the clarity, leave the confusion. You don't need to carry the entire season forward. Carry what nourishes you. And this is an important thing. It may seem selfish, but it's not. It's not. This is important. Carry what nourishes you and leave what doesn't. Don't take everything with you into the next season, because you're going to spend the next season trying to get rid of the things from last season. If you took the entire corn plant, roots and all, into the barn, when it was time to eat the corn, you'd have to separate it from the rest of the stalk and then figure out what to do with it. Take the corn into the barn, leave the rest. Carry what nourishes you, leave the rest in the field. All right? So let's make this practical. A couple of things here that maybe would help out. I'll give you some exercises that you can use to end any season of your life, really. But as we come to the end of summer, maybe this will help. So get a notebook and complete these 5 statements. It's 5 statements. Don't rush them. Don't judge them. Just complete them. Number 1, this season gave me what? Maybe friendships, maybe rest, maybe confidence, maybe perspective, a new opportunity, clarity, memory, maybe difficulty. Write whatever comes to mind. What did this season give you? Okay. Number 2, this season taught me. What did this season teach you? What do you know now that you didn't know before? About yourself, about relationships, about work, about priorities, about life. Statement number 3, this season challenged me to what? What were you challenged in this season? To speak up, to slow down, to let go, To try again, to set a boundary, to ask for help, to trust yourself? What did this season challenge you to do? Number 4, this season reminded me. Maybe it reminded you that family matters, that rest matters, that life moves quickly, that you enjoy being outside, that friendships require attention, that you don't need as much as you thought you needed to be happy. What did it remind you? And statement number 5, because of this season, I want to. This is where reflection becomes action. What will you do differently? Not 20 things, 1 or 2. Because the purpose of wisdom isn't simply to know more. The purpose is to live differently. If you gather wisdom and don't apply it, then it's not wisdom. It's not wisdom. So those are the 5 statements you can finish. Here's another exercise that can be really important. Try describing the season of your life in 1 sentence. What is this season right now in 1 sentence? Maybe this was the summer I learned to slow down. Or this was the summer I stopped trying to please everyone. Maybe this was the summer I realized I was stronger than I thought. Or this was the summer I learned I needed to change. Maybe this was the summer I rediscovered joy. Or even this was the summer I survived something difficult. Your sentence doesn't have to sound impressive. It just needs to be true. Sometimes naming a season helps us to understand it. Okay? And one of the other important things about understanding human life is that it's never black and white. It's never good and bad. You don't need to label everything as good or bad. All right? We tend to characterize experiences quickly. A good summer, good year, good job, bad relationship, success, failure. But life is usually more complicated, my friends. A difficult experience can produce something valuable. A wonderful experience can contain challenges. You can be grateful something happened and glad it's over. You can love someone and recognize the relationship needs to change. You can be proud of what you accomplished and still acknowledge mistakes. You can be disappointed and hopeful at the same time. Maturity allows life to be complicated. We are allowed to hold two disparate ideas in tension at the same time. You don't have to reduce every season to was it good or bad. Maybe the better question is, what did it give me? What did I learn from it? Where was the joys? Where were the sorrows? Where were the struggles? Where were the excitements? And then take the lesson into the next season. The point of reflection isn't to live backwards, my friends. We're not trying to stay in summer forever. We're preparing to move forward. But we want to move forward wiser. Imagine learning that you feel dramatically better when you protect one evening each week from commitments. Then fall arrives and your calendar fills up and you abandon that lesson. What was the point? Or you discover you feel healthier when you walk regularly. Then life gets busy and you stop. Or you discover that spending less time online improves your mood, but you return to the same old habits. Harvest requires more than recognizing the lesson. You have to carry it forward. You want to ask, how can I build what I learned into the way I live? That's where growth becomes sustainable. And remember, it doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to be perfect. And the season doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to have a perfect summer for it to be meaningful. Maybe you didn't travel, or you didn't accomplish your goals, or the weather ruined your plans, or work was demanding, or family responsibilities consumed your time. Maybe this season wasn't what you hoped. Don't automatically call it a waste. Look more carefully. There may still be something there. Something you learned, something you discovered, something you survived, something you appreciated, something you fully and finally understood, something you're ready to change. That's all part of the harvest. It doesn't have to be perfect to learn something from it. As we close today, I want you to picture a late summer field. Months ago, there wasn't much to see. The seeds were placed in the ground, and for a while, nothing happened. Then tiny shoots appeared. They grew. Rain came, heat came, storm came. The plants were tested, and eventually, something emerged that wasn't there before. That's the beauty of harvest. Harvest says something came from this. And maybe that's what you need to say about this season in your life. Something came from it. Maybe not what you expected. Maybe not what you wanted. Maybe not as much as you hoped for, but something. Wisdom, strength, clarity, friendship, courage, perspective, gratitude. A better understanding of yourself, a clearer picture of what matters. Don't rush past that. Gather it in, name it, be grateful for it, learn from it, carry it, and then leave behind what no longer needs to travel with you. Because every season has something to teach us if we're willing to pay attention.
Before you rush into what's next, stop and ask, what did this season give me? What did it teach me? What do I carry forward? And perhaps more importantly, how will I live differently because I've been through it? Don't leave the fields empty-handed. You've lived these days. You've faced these experiences. You've paid the price for some of these lessons. So gather the wisdom. Take the good, leave, learn from the difficult, celebrate the growth, and carry the best of it with you. Remember, my friends, experience gives us memories, reflection gives us wisdom, and wisdom helps us enter the next season differently than we entered the last. That's what I got for you for today. I hope it's helpful. If it is, please share it out there. Put it out there on your social media feeds. Put it out there on your listening platforms. If you want to reach out to me directly, GraceLifeCoaching.com is the website. At Grace Life Coaching, we want you to be the best you.